I thought it was really interesting, actually, what Piers just finished up with there, talking about the fact that the research industry is seen as lagging behind in terms of mobile and in terms of engaging participants, some of those hard-to-reach audiences, particularly when we think about mobile, because actually that's a little bit of a theme of the presentation that I've got today. So as Robin said, the title is Standing in Their Shoes, and today I'm going to talk about how the research industry needs to change in order to sustain the quality, the energy and the participation of the people that we rely on to take part in our market research. So I'm going to be talking about how we need to engage people more on their terms, how we need to fit our work around them rather than just assuming that they'll want to take part and answer the questions that we've got, and ultimately how we need to stand in their shoes. So I've been in this industry now for about 15 years, and back when I was a little bit younger, when I started out in the research industry, this is what my hometown of Manchester looked like. It was in the black and white days. Okay, it wasn't quite in the black and white days, but back sort of 15 or so years ago, the people of Manchester would be quite willing to stand in the rain and take part in a 25-minute paper survey and answer all our questions because they were far too polite to decline taking part. We were all right in those days. We could get away with it. But ultimately, we live in a time now where people are time poor. People don't have the time or the inclination to stand outside in the rain for 25 minutes answering our dull and laborious questions. People are mobile obsessed, they have short attention spans, so we need to do something to capture their attention, to make them want to engage with the work that we're doing. So firstly, we need to widen the pool of people who are prepared to take part in the research that we do. And we've got to start offering them a different experience, something that they're actually prepared to engage with. Secondly, I think we all know that we really want to be trying to get better quality responses from those people who are prepared to take part in the research that we do. And linked to quality, there's also the question of energy. So as I said, we live in a world of distractions and short attention spans. And if we ever thought that we still had a fully functioning participant after answering 30 minutes of dull, laborious questions, then we certainly don't these days. So over the last 12 months or so, we've been working on a solution or a philosophy that we're calling people-centered research. And in a nutshell, instead of asking people to take part in research on our terms, using our language, our techniques, our questioning styles, we've been redesigning our surveys and our studies to fit more naturally with people's lifestyles, with their needs, with their behaviours, and with their expectations. Unfortunately, that's not actually that difficult to do. You simply have to stop thinking like a market researcher and try and put yourself in the shoes of the people that we're trying to engage with, those consumers. For those of you who were here at the last breakfast seminar, I talked about happiness and I talked a lot about empathising with consumers and the fact that when we get into work, we kind of put our work heads on and we want to examine consumers and think about them as though there's this other species, when actually we're all consumers and we're all people. And when we get into work, we kind of think differently and we kind of revert to market research mode and we're not necessarily empathising with people. So this kind of follows on really from what I was talking about last time. So there are three things really that we can think about here. The first is to think about what is the context that people are taking part in our research. Where are they likely to be when they get the invitation to take part in our surveys? And what else are they likely to be doing? Are they sitting on the MRT? Are they on a bus? Are they watching the TV? Are they doing something else at the same time? What devices are they likely to be using? And how much time have they got to take part? Then there's the content of the activity that we're asking them to undertake. We need to ask ourselves how much people really care about the topic that we're asking them about. Because as market researchers, as marketeers, as brand managers, we may spend all day, every day thinking about shampoo, but our consumers, the people who are buying those products, probably don't. So we need to make the things that we ask them to do engaging so that they want to take part and they feel that they've got something to tell us and they'll give us great quality responses. And thirdly, we need to think about how we can best communicate with the audience that we're trying to talk to. So we need to think about things like, How do people like to share their opinions and their thoughts? What types of questions do people actually enjoy answering? So I'm now going to share with you some of the practical examples and some of the experiments that we've been doing at Join the Dots in those three areas. So I'm going to start off with context, and this is about thinking, where are people at when we invite them to take part in our research and when they're taking part in our research? And of course, it's very likely that they're going to be using a mobile phone. So across all of our communities, including the UK and globally, about 40% of our participants take part using mobile phones. That's on average. On some of our communities, it's actually around 80%. So there's a huge variation dependent on the market, dependent on the topic, and also dependent on the audience that we've got within those communities. So making improvements here, making things work well on a mobile is absolutely critical to kind of helping to generate those better quality responses. So we thought, well, let's build some tools that will work really well on a mobile. So we looked at what social media apps do. So lots of people are using social media apps. They don't find them boring. They find them engaging. They like to interact with them. What can we learn from them? If we step outside the market research industry, what can we learn? So we've got a tool here, which apparently is based on Tinder. I wouldn't know anything about Tinder personally. I did download it in the purposes of market research to understand what happens on Tinder. And for those of you who don't know, like me, who was, didn't know anything about it. So Tinder is it's a dating app, and you get to sort of see people's pictures. You swipe left if you don't like them. You swipe right if you do like them. It's a little bit brutal, actually. But we decided to design a research tool that kind of emulates this. And there's lots of different things you can use for it. So the example here, you can agree or disagree with a statement, and you can either click the button or you can swipe it left and right to say whether you agree or disagree. But we have to do experiments to make sure that actually do these tools work better, because it's all very well saying let's do something cool and Tinder-based, but actually does it generate better responses? Does it engage people more? So we did a study in the UK to test this, and it was all about Brexit and attitudes to Brexit, which I'm sure you've all heard about. I'm not going to say any more about Brexit. Actually, I will, because I will mention it a couple of times. But we did a split sample, and we asked 400 people in the UK to take part in this survey, and we asked them a bank of 10 statements. So 400 people, we gave them a traditional rating scale, a 4-point rating scale, to tell us how they felt about Brexit. And the other 400 used this kind of Tinder-based swipe tool instead. And the average completion time actually was improved by 16%. So it was quicker for people to answer these questions. And what's also interesting is, I don't know if any of you have come across the work of a chap called John Poulston in the UK, who's done a huge amount of looking at different types of questions, impact on engagement, satisfaction, data quality. He talks a lot about using binary choice questions rather than scale questions and giving people a yes-no answer. And it's like, if you think about Tinder, you don't get asked, how much do you like this person? Do you like them a lot or a little bit or not so much? It's just yes, no. It's a binary choice, because that's how we work in the real world. So we're trying to emulate that with the questions that we're using. And actually, we're not just using this on rating scales. We've been using this recently with a financial services client in the UK to rate a number of concepts. You can go through lots of different concepts quite quickly, just filtering out those that people initially don't like, leaving you more time to focus on the ones that are rated quite well. So that's a little bit on context. And if we move on to think about content, and it's here where we can have a really big impact on increasing the quality of what we get back from our participants. So about 2/3 of the work that we do at Join the Dots is online qualitative communities. So it's really important that we give people rewarding and engaging experiences to keep them engaged, to keep them giving us great quality information so that we can go back to our clients with those insights. So we use quite a lot of projective techniques. This is our journalist tool, and we ask people to write us a headline. It might be about a new product concept that we've just shown them. It might be about a big kind of major news event. We get them to write a headline about it, and then we get them to write an article. And it's actually really interesting, some of the stories that people will tell us in these types of questions. We also use obituaries, deprivation techniques. We ask people to write letters to their younger selves. And these techniques typically generate about 2 to 3 times more content than just asking a standard open question. We also get much more emotional responses and much richer language. So overall, it's generating much, much better quality data. That said, you do have to be a little bit careful about overusing these techniques, because while some people really love them, really enjoy this type of question, some people don't. So you have to use them sparingly and not just fill the whole survey with these types of techniques, because it can get a little bit too much cognitive load for people if there's too much in there. Again, thinking about content, here's another example with a more quantitative approach. And this is our story builder tool, and it is working. So this is where we ask people to answer multiple closed questions, but in the form of a narrative. So rather than having to go through lots of pages or scroll a lot, we're actually asking them a number of questions all in one, but building up a picture of their story within those questions. When they get to the end of those questions, they can then go back and change their answers. And we can also ask them an open question at the bottom to then say, reflect on these answers that you've just given us. Is there anything else you want to tell us about this little story that you've just told us? And that stops people having to scroll through lots of pages or scroll anywhere else or click through to lots of pages. It's interesting because actually the number of mobile surveys I've seen as my time at, taking part in mobile surveys, where you see like grid questions and you have to scroll to the right to see the grid because they're not mobile optimized. Whoever scrolls right on a website, never mind on a mobile, you don't do that on a desktop. So this is about just thinking about that experience that people have online and trying to reflect that in the surveys that we do. We typically get 2.5 times more responses in the open question at the end of this one as well. So again, it's just engaging people in a different way. So on the third and final theme, which of people-centered research, which is this idea of communication, what we're really trying to do is to make research fit as seamlessly as possible into people's natural mobile behavior. So basically, we looked at the types of things that people do in real life when they're not taking part in our surveys and replicated that in our research designs. So people don't communicate with grids. This is not news to us. We should know this. So we said, well, how can we get rid of grids? What can we do instead of grids? So we took a cue from TripAdvisor and from Amazon. These are the types of things where people are willing to share their opinions naturally. How can we emulate that in our surveys? And we get better data, actually, is the answer. So going back to our Brexit study, we asked half of our respondents, half our participants, 400 of them, a traditional rating scale question saying, post-Brexit, what's it like living in the UK on a 1 to 5 scale where blah, 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 blah. And we asked the other 400 participants, imagine you're on TripAdvisor. Give living in Britain, in the UK, a post-Brexit star rating. And the data we got back was significantly improved. Now, what's interesting is the data actually gave us the same mean score of 3.3, regardless of which sample we looked at. But there was much greater variance in the star rating data, and that better reflected the open responses, the variance and the richness of those open responses that we got. And in terms of those open responses, 400 people gave us 12,000 words in those open comments. The people who'd been asked to do the TripAdvisor style question versus only 5,000 words from the 400 people who'd been asked to do the standard open question. So a huge impact, an uplift in the amount of data that people actually gave us and the responses that they shared. And also the number of themes that we were then able to explore. And what's also quite nice about this technique is that because we ask people to give their review a heading, they have their own value in their own right as well. And you can see people have actually been quite creative here with some of the titles they've given their reviews, disgraceful, shocking and foolish, divided and torn apart. People have really given this some thought. They've not just put, I don't know, or it's okay, or I don't like it in an open text box. So it does show you can have a real impact on the amount of effort people will put into taking part by doing something actually quite simple. We've also taken a leaf out of Twitter's book, and our initial trials have found that by asking people to do less, you actually get more. So when you put on a limit and tell people they've only got 140 characters to answer, they actually give you more of a response than they would in a standard open question. Now that seems counterintuitive, but psychologically you've put an anchor on there, you've given them 140 characters, so they start thinking about that higher anchor rather than thinking about what's the minimum I can write in this text box. So on the Brexit study, again, we asked how people felt about the vote. One half in the form of a tweet, one half standard open question. Firstly, we got a 33% increase in the average response from 9.6 to 12.8 words. But more importantly, we actually got wider representation of opinion across the sample. Only 4% gave us a one-word answer in the tweet question versus 30% who gave us a one-word answer in the standard open question. So again, much more data from these participants. Now, one thing to bear in mind here is if you are going to limit people to 140 characters, you are going to miss out on some of those people who've got a lot to say about this particular matter. And they're probably going to be the people with a really strong opinion, either positively or negatively. And it kind of depends on what's your objective, what's the most important data for you to collect. If it is to understand those extremes, maybe a tweet question isn't the best thing because some people will want to write more than you're allowing them to. But if it's actually to get a more rich sense of the themes and the opinions across a sample, then maybe this is the sort of thing that you could try. The last example I'm going to share with you is an experiment we're doing with emojis. And in the Brexit survey, we asked people to plot their emotional journeys with Brexit during the referendum period, just purely using emojis. And this is what it looked like. Now, obviously, we can just use counts, and we can count up the smiley faces or the red faces or the piles of poo. And we've still got a lot of work to do in understanding what emojis mean to people, both across cultures, actually within cultures, and also just in terms of different operating systems, because different operating systems display emojis quite differently. We've actually got our own set, so they are consistent, whatever operating system someone's using when they're within our surveys. But they are all different across different emojis, across different operating systems. I read actually yesterday that there's an emoji that's appeared recently on some mobile phones that's kind of doing this. I don't know what that means, actually, but it's got 6 fingers. 6 fingers and 5 fingers. Wait. 5 fingers and a thumb, so look out for that, it's a bit spooky. So interpretation of emojis and kind of what sort of language, what the meaning of that is, there's still quite a lot of work to do on exploring that and experimenting going forward. But while I'm just touching on language, we've got to drop the pseudo-scientific language that we've been clinging on to as a market research industry for the last 50 years. The BBC doesn't speak like that anymore. Brands don't speak like that anymore. Why are we still doing it in market research surveys? Why are we asking people to tell us about the last occasion on which they may have purchased a particular product? Nobody speaks like that. You're actually using more words in there. If you're trying to mobile optimize your survey, keep your sentences shorter, make it more interesting, speak the way that people speak in real life. Okay, sorry, rant over. So hopefully you found this interesting, and like me, you feel some sense of hope that we can leave some of these kind of negative things behind, and we can take some of the positives and drop some of the pseudo-scientific language, drop some of the tools and disciplines that as an industry we've been clinging on to for the last few years, because everybody benefits from this kind of approach, clients, agencies, and participants. Agencies and researchers have more fun designing the studies and analysing and interpreting the results. Clients get more representative data back and better quality insights, and participants enjoy the studies more. So at the end of the Brexit survey, we asked people how much they'd enjoyed taking part. We got a 23 percentage point uplift in the proportion. We did use a rating scale on this, admittedly. There's only so many of these techniques you can throw in. I did say that. But we got a 23 percentage point uplift in the proportion saying that they enjoyed taking part in the survey. There is a note of caution. We also asked people how easy they felt it was to complete, and we saw a 19 percentage point decrease in the proportion saying it felt easy. So while more people enjoyed taking part, it was actually a little bit more difficult for them to complete. So despite the fact that we've got some questions that are much easier to answer, the Tinder swipes, the story builder questions, etc., we're making them work harder when it comes to things like the open-ended questions. So it is about getting the balance right of the more complex ones, the ones that we're asking them to do more versus those easier questions. So we need to use these techniques responsibly, I think. So while we've still got a lot more to learn, I would urge all of you to think in more people-centered ways. Think about the context of when we're asking people to take part and what else it is they're doing and how engaged they're likely to be in the subject matter. Think about the content that we serve to them and the way that we communicate with them to share that information. Or in short, please make an effort to stand in their shoes. Thank you.